Hey, welcome to The Explainer. In a world that feels more and more unpredictable, we're digging into a simple question with some seriously profound answers. So, what's the secret sauce? Today, we're going to unpack the playbooks of some of the world's most successful people. And I mean everyone from billionaires in the boardroom to, enlightened masters in the ashram. We're going to see how they don't just survive, but actually thrive in a world that's always changing. So here's the game plan. First, we'll lay out the problem we're all dealing with. Then we'll get into what happens inside our brains when things get weird. After that, we'll check out two really powerful toolkits for handling it all. And stick around because we're going to finish up by looking at the surprising common ground between them. All right, let's dive right in. The crisis of uncertainty. So, what do we even mean when we say the world is so uncertain? And look, this isn't just you feeling anxious. Experts agree. Even the Harvard Business Review is calling it an uncertainty crisis. Think about it. From technology to geopolitics, the one thing that's become certain is that we just don't know what's coming next. It's kind of the new normal. Okay, so what happens in our brains when everything we planned for just goes up in smoke? When we're staring at a totally blank future? Well, it turns out our brains have a default setting for this. When we face the unknown, it lights up this really primitive part of our brain, the survival instinct part. It's basically a hijacked, bam, straight into fight or flight mode. And here's the thing, it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's not a weakness, it's literally how we're wired to survive. But then you have this completely different take from the spiritual master Sadhguru. He basically says, fear isn't about what's happening now, it's about what you think might happen later. He puts it this way, you're suffering something that does not exist. In other words, you're suffering from your own imagination. Wow. Okay, let's make this real. Imagine this. You're a 26-year-old guy named Brandon Tay. You're just working the cash register at your family's dance hall, and an active shooter walks in. This is about as uncertain and terrifying as it gets. He said later he was absolutely terrified. Every rational part of his brain must have been screaming, run or hide. But then, his instinct took over. He did something that even he couldn't believe. He just went for it. He fought the gunman, disarmed him, and saved who knows how many lives. The key here, he didn't act without fear. He acted in spite of it. Okay, here's another story. Picture a 14-year-old kid. He's at home, and he's watching this guy with a gun tucked into his pants try to bully his mom into selling her land. The kid is just frozen, totally paralyzed by fear. So while the son is running through all the horrible possibilities in his head, what does his mom do? This woman, who's only 5'1", walks right up to the guy and slaps him right across the face. Just like that. The guy was so shocked, he just turned around and left. And these two stories, they just perfectly illustrate the core idea here. Just because you're scared doesn't mean you do nothing. Brandon, the mother, they were both scared, but the fear didn't get to make the final decision. It's just an emotion, a signal. It's not a command to freeze up. This goes way back. Even Aristotle talks about this. There's a huge difference between courage and just being reckless, right? Courage is about taming your fear. It's not about pretending danger doesn't exist. That's recklessness. And that's a good way to get yourself into a lot of trouble. So, okay, that's the psychology. But how do you actually do this? How do you tame the fear? Well, let's switch gears and look at the practical playbook used by some of the sharpest entrepreneurs out there. Think about this. The pandemic hits. You're the CEO of TripAdvisor. And in 1 month, your revenue drops 90%. That is total chaos. But instead of panicking, the CEO used a really simple 3-step playbook. First, assess your options. Second, minimize the disaster. And third, and this is crucial, focus only on what you can actually control. And sometimes the playbook means trusting your gut, even when the data says you're crazy. There's this great story about an entrepreneur who bought a company that, on paper, was a total disaster. Every spreadsheet was just screaming no, but he had a feeling, an intuition about it. And guess what? It turned out to be the best investment in the company's 70-year history. It's a great lesson. Use data as a guardrail to keep you from driving off a cliff, but don't let it be the one behind the wheel. Another huge part of this playbook is a mental shift. It's about separating yourself from the outcome. The idea is, if your business idea fails, that doesn't mean you're a bad person or a failure. It just means the idea didn't work. When you really get that, it just lowers the stakes. It makes it so much easier to take those smart, calculated risks without being terrified of what happens if you're wrong. Okay, so that's the entrepreneur's playbook. Very practical, very action-oriented. But what if there's another way? What if, instead of trying to control the chaos out there, you focused on changing your response in here? Well, that's where we get to the sage's approach. Sadhguru's idea is that we cause a lot of our own suffering. It's not the situation itself that hurts us, it's the label we slap on it. We call it a disaster or a total nightmare. But what if you just took off the label? What if it's not good or bad? It's just a situation. And your only job is to respond to it with all the intelligence and competence you have. And this all leads to a really radical idea. Sadhguru says, uncertainty is the nature of life. If you don't enjoy that, you will not be fit for life. Think about that. He's saying, stop trying to fight reality. Uncertainty isn't the exception, it's the rule. So the goal shouldn't be to get rid of uncertainty. That's impossible. The goal is to get good at living with it. Now here's where it gets really interesting. We've talked about the entrepreneur's playbook and the sage's philosophy. They seem like totally different worlds, right? But what's so fascinating is that both of these paths, well, they lead to the exact same conclusion. It all comes down to purpose over profit. Look at this comparison. You've got your pure profit mindset, which is all about maximizing returns for shareholders. And sure, that works. But then you have the purpose and profit model. These are the companies focused on creating real value for society. And what happens? They end up with better reputations, more inspired employees, and yeah, even better stock performance in the long run. It's like having a deeper why creates a resilience that just chasing dollars can't match. So why does purpose work so well? Well, for one, it inspires people. We're talking employees who are way more productive. It builds goodwill, it creates loyalty, and it even attracts investors who want to be part of that mission. But fundamentally, it's an anchor. Whether it's TripAdvisor starting a foundation or a family business with a 75-year history of giving back, having that fixed point of purpose gives you something to hold on to when everything else is a storm. When the how is a total mess, your why keeps you on track. So let's end with this question. If fear is just suffering over things that don't exist yet, what could you actually achieve if you focused only on what does exist? Right here, right now. Because that's the real takeaway, isn't it? Whether you're a billionaire or a sage, the strategy is the same. Find your anchor. The entrepreneur anchors in practical action, in what they can control. The sage anchors in the present moment, in reality. But for both of them, having a deep, unshakable purpose is the true north that guides them when the map is gone and the world is uncertain.